This is an incredible story about Ryo Tatsuki, a woman who made her debut when she was 20 as a manga artist. Ryo Tatsuki is her pen name. Just a side note here, there's a slight difference between the terms manga and comics, but I'll be using the terms interchangeably in this video. Also, this topic was quite a big one to take on with a lot of different information floating around, so I've made it into a two-part series. I'll discuss the overall storyline in part 1 and share some of her actual dreams in part 2, which I'm sure you'll want to hear. So, it all started with a notebook Ryo's mother gave her back in 1985. She decided to use it as a dream diary. She didn't have any unusual dreams. They were all normal ones that reflected her personal life, and she wasn't expecting any of it to become the subject of her comic books. She decided to start writing her dreams down out of curiosity. She wanted to analyze them using books that interpret dreams and see what her mental, spiritual, and emotional states were in. But it was also true that she saw some of the places and faces in her dreams in real life, kind of like a déjà vu, and that piqued her interest even more. It was all meant to be just for fun. It was all meant to remain private. In the 90s, she began to draw ghost and horror stories in magazines. She had zero psychic abilities, so she drew comics of actual experiences that people shared with her, but they eventually dried up. Her sister-in-law was a nurse, so she would often tell her scary hospital-related stories, but a lot of them couldn't be used because they had already been published in magazines before. And that's when she thought of her dream diary. As a last-ditch effort, she went through all of them and picked her déjà vu experiences and other strange dreams and began to draw. She published 2 comic books. One of the dreams she chose was about a tsunami that she dreamt when she was younger. In the dream, the temperature was unstable even in spring, and small earthquakes were occurring across Japan. Judging by the t-shirt she was wearing in her dream, she assumed it was summer when an enormous tsunami approached with a roaring sound. People were running and screaming in all directions, and she lost consciousness. When she woke up, those scenes were etched into her mind as if she just watched a movie, and she proceeded to write it down. She wanted to publish it, but every time she sat down and began drawing drafts, she was overcome with nausea and chills, so she was never able to do it. According to the editor, many readers had sent in letters with their own tsunami dreams asking them to be published. He knew I had had a dream too and suggested that I represent their voices and publish my own dream instead. So, that's what she did, and the manga was titled The Future That I Saw. After this work was published, she was at the end of her rope. She didn't have any more stories, no more ideas, nothing left to draw, and so she made the hard decision to retire. When she made her intentions clear to the editor, he made one last suggestion so that she could go out with a bang, and that was to compile all of her published work and release it as a book. These included her dream diary episodes. The cover of the book was completed just a day before the deadline. She drew a woman with a bunch of papers around her. Each paper contained important pieces of information that she saw in her dreams. However, there was just one piece that remained blank, and she couldn't decide what to write on it. That night, she had a dream. She saw letters displayed on a white blank space like a movie screen. It read, "The big disaster will be on March 2011. When she woke up in the morning, the choice was obvious. She was going to write those words on the last piece of paper on the cover, thereby completing it. She didn't want to have any regrets by not writing it on the cover, so those words were the very last ones she wrote down before she retired as a manga artist. Keep in mind that the previous tsunami dream that I just mentioned was different to this one. That one is believed to have happened in the summer, and March in Japan is still fairly cold. Also, with this dream, the only thing she saw were words, no actual scenes of the event. All of this happened in July of 1999, which coincided with the month in which Nostradamus predicted that there would be some monstrous calamity, perhaps even the end of the world. None of this was on Ryo's mind when she handed in her final draft of her book. Because people around the world went on living their lives as normal, therefore proving his prophecy to be false, Ryo's editor was unhappy that she put in something that she saw occurring far off in the future in 2011. "What if what you said doesn't come true?" he said. "Don't worry, it's more than 10 years from now. No one's going to remember anything about this," said Ryo, trying to ease her editor's worries, but he remained unconvinced. After retiring, she worked in various jobs for about a year, including computer graphics, medical office work, and architecture-related jobs. She knew from the beginning that she wouldn't be a manga artist for the rest of her life and had prepared to leave her pen name behind and live the rest of her life using her real name. She also naturally drifted away from her friends and colleagues from her manga days. The years went by and the Great East Japan earthquake occurred in March of 2011. Amidst the big tremors, she never thought, "It's just like that dream I had," because by this time she had completely forgotten about it and the fact that she'd published it. So Ryo wasn't the first one to notice that what she'd drawn on the cover of her manga all those years ago had come true. Not long after the earthquake, people around her started telling her that netizens were talking about her dream coming true. It was beginning to cause a movement. However, at this time, she was convinced it would quickly be forgotten again, so she didn't think much of it. I'm sure most, if not all of you know, that the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami occurred on March 11th, 2011.
津波です。道路が冠水しています。今時刻3時20分です。津波が防波堤を越えました。津波が防潮堤を越えている。津波防潮堤を越えました。流れ込んでいます。車を離されています。ものすごいパワーだ。光景です。全てのものを飲み込みながら津波が押し寄せています。まさかこのような光景を見ることになるとは思いませんでした。恐ろしい光景です。
At 2:46 p.m., a magnitude 9.1 undersea earthquake occurred in the Pacific Ocean, 72 kilometers east of the Oshika Peninsula, northeast of Japan. It lasted approximately 6 minutes, causing a tsunami that reached heights of up to 40.5 meters or 133 feet in Miyako in Iwate Prefecture. It traveled at 700 kilometers per hour or 435 miles per hour and up to 10 kilometers or 6 miles inland. It was the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Japan and the fourth most powerful earthquake recorded in the world since modern seismography began in 1900. Residents had only 8 to 10 minutes of warning and more than 100 evacuation sites were washed away. The snowfall which accompanied the tsunami and the freezing temperature hindered rescue workers greatly. For instance, Ishinomaki, the city with most deaths, was 0 degrees Celsius or 30 degrees Fahrenheit as the tsunami hit. The official figures released in 2021 reported 19,759 deaths, 6,242 injured, and 2,553 people missing. As many as 100,000 children were uprooted from their homes, some of whom were separated from their families because the earthquake occurred during the school day. The quake and tsunami killed 378 students and left 158 others missing. The Japanese Foreign Ministry confirmed the deaths of 19 foreigners. Among them were 2 English teachers from the United States affiliated with the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, a Canadian missionary, and citizens of China, North and South Korea, Taiwan, Pakistan, and the Philippines. May all their souls rest in peace, and my heart truly goes out to every single person who was affected by this catastrophe. If that isn't enough to convince you, here are a few more facts about the earthquake. It was so massive that it moved Honshu 2.4 meters or 8 feet east, shifted the Earth on its axis by estimates of about 10 to 25 centimeters or 4 to 10 inches, and increased Earth's rotational speed by 1.8 milliseconds per day. It just blows my mind. Let's get back to the story. One evening, Ryo was watching one of her favorite TV shows called Urban Legends Gone Too Far, which was a show that talked about whether certain myths and urban legends were true or not. As she was watching, they began talking about the book she had published back in 1999 and how her premonition or prophecy that she had written on the cover actually came true. Parts of the cover of the book were blurred out, probably due to copyright reasons, but she could see that it was her book. Needless to say, she was completely shocked to see them talking about her. According to the TV hosts, they had tried to contact her, but because her publisher at the time, Asahi Sonorama, wasn't in operation anymore, they were unable to reach her. This show's influence was enormous. After it was broadcasted, her nephew and niece showed her their phones and told her how much the internet was blowing up about it. They were middle schoolers, so they told her that everyone was talking about it in school too. You might think it's strange that Ryo didn't know about any of this without her family informing her of it, but she wasn't the type to browse the internet much at all. She used her computer to draw and for work, but she didn't have internet connection at home. And it was only very recently that she actually bought a smartphone for herself. She was also the type to think that news on the internet was unreliable, so she always went to the library if she was seeking out facts about anything. The situation really came to a head in 2020 when someone, taking advantage of Ryo's name and her newfound fame, began to impersonate her. Again, this was brought to her attention by her niece, who showed her an article online where a fake Ryo Tatsuki was making nonsense claims about what would occur in the future. In 2021, it began to appear in various magazines across Japan. She kept quiet in the beginning, thinking that as long as this person didn't drag her name through the mud, she preferred to remain in the dark. However, because there were zero repercussions for what they were doing, it gradually became worse. They published that they had actually seen the Great Hanshin earthquake, also known as the Kobe earthquake, which occurred on January 17, 1995, in the southern part of Hyogo Prefecture. It measured 7 on the seismic scale, and approximately 6,434 people died. I mean, these scenes look like they were taken from a movie about the apocalypse. The imposter didn't stop there. Apparently, they had also foreseen the death of Yutaka Ozaki, a very popular musician who died at the young age of 26 due to a suspected drug overdose on April 25, 1992. And they warned everyone that Mount Fuji will erupt in August of that year, 2021. Now, I'm a bit confused here because these statements were actually portrayed in her book that was published in 1999. Maybe the fake Ryo Tatsuki analyzed it his own way, and perhaps Ryo, who knows the real meaning behind her dreams, felt like the person was saying the wrong things or getting ahead of themselves. I couldn't quite figure it out because of the actual overlap, so I apologize for not being able to be precise here. I will be talking about all of these dreams in part 2. So, whoever this was acting like some kind of prophet, and this is when she realized she needed to do something about it. But she didn't know how. She didn't want to contact them directly because this person was clearly out of his or her mind, and there was too much danger and uncertainty to contact them in person. That was when another TV program caught her eye. This one was called Unbelievable, and it's actually a show that I used to watch too. These days I don't watch much TV, but it's a show that collects unbelievable stories from Japan and around the world and recreates them. They cover everything from miracles, true crime, and the paranormal. I've heard some truly amazing stories on this show. So anyway, when Ryo was watching this show one night, there was a reenactment of a manga about true mysterious experiences. Seeing this, she felt that the producers of this program would be open-minded enough to want to listen to her side of the story, so she gave them a call. Lucky for her, apparently they had been trying to contact her too. Considering there was a fake Ryo amongst their midst, she had to give them proof that she was the real deal. She handed in documents that proved that Ryo Tatsuki was her pen name, in addition to drafts of her previous works. It was after this that the book she published in 1999 got thrust back into the limelight. She went on to put together another book, which was the complete version of the one published years before. And like she had that dream the day before her deadline all those years ago, it happened again. This time in July of 2021, just before the deadline of the complete version of her manga. The dream was eerily similar. Just some words and a date on a blank white screen. It said, "The real disaster will come in July of 2025. But something else happened. After the words disappeared, she saw a scene unfold before her. It looked like she was looking down on Earth from outer space, and she could see the ocean floor like the satellite view of Google Maps. She saw the epicenter of the earthquake swell up, and that part of the ocean bubbling as if it was boiling. At that time, she believed this dream had something to do with the tsunami dream she had drawn years ago, which was the dream that I talked about at the beginning of this video. This was not about the Great East Japan earthquake because she could see that the tsunami was about 3 times bigger than that. She scribbled down words and scenes from her dream the moment she woke up. She didn't want to put too much stock into it, but considering she dreamt about the March 11th Great East Japan earthquake, she felt like she should share it. There is that slight possibility that maybe it will happen, and we won't find out until July next year. I will go into much more detail about this dream in part 2. One day, Ryo reunited with her mentor, Miss Miyuchi, after 30 long years. Ryo sent her a copy of her book back in 1999, but she'd apparently seen it in the bookstore first and had already bought it. Miss Miyuchi had interacted with many people with psychic and supernatural abilities and had even published books based on their experiences, but she'd never met anyone who was able to foresee the Great East Japan earthquake. And so, when she saw Ryo's predictions drawn on the cover, and when it actually happened on that month of that year, she was extremely surprised by it. She suggested that maybe Ryo had a really important job to do on this earth. In an interview, the following is what Ryo said about her being some sort of divine messenger. She states, "I think most people let their guard down, assuming that a major disaster happens once every hundreds or thousands of years and therefore won't happen within their lifetime. It doesn't matter if that's true or not. What everyone should consider is that it could happen in your lifetime and you need to be prepared for it. The Great East Japan earthquake is evidence. Even though a similar disaster had occurred in the same place in the past and there were stone monuments that reminded people of the tragic past, everyone just ignored it. They forgot it ever happened, and then the earthquake hit again in 2011. Things might have turned out differently if people thought, what if something really happens? They might have been better prepared and the number of casualties might have been less. But I can't deny that most people, including myself, never thought to keep the date in our minds. We all forgot it was ever written, and it was never brought up until after it happened. However, things are different now. Most people across Japan are learning about me, and they're paying close attention to my words. If I can sound the alarm about possible future catastrophes, maybe we can do what we couldn't before. I want everyone to research the topographical characteristics of where they live and past disasters and take measures to protect themselves. You won't lose anything by being prepared for various possible disasters. If something happens, people will be saying, "I'm so glad I did it." You'll never hear someone complaining, "Oh geez, I was way too prepared." Ryo Tatsuki doesn't specify which past disaster she was referring to, but I did some research and I'm assuming she was talking about the Sanriku earthquake, which also hit the northeastern coast of Japan on March 2nd, 1933. It was an 8.4 magnitude earthquake and caused tsunamis as high as 28.7 meters or 94 feet. The tsunami was also recorded all the way in Hawaii with a height of 2.9 meters or 9.5 feet. 3,064 people dead or missing, and over 12,000 people were injured. Let me tell you, I never heard about her until I was doing some research for the topic of my next special episode. I probably never heard of her because I didn't live in Japan until a few years after the Great East Japan earthquake happened. But now that I'm here, I unfortunately won't be forgetting the date, July 2025. I just hope she's wrong and that nothing happens. I can't imagine a tsunami that's 3 times higher. That will make it about 120 meters or almost 400 feet. Although I'm not convinced that people can actually see the future, it's still terrifying. It's terrifying because we live in southern Japan, which is close to where Ryo says the earthquake will occur. If it indeed happens, we might get swallowed up. And, on that depressing note, part 1 comes to a close. I will do my best to release part 2 next week. However, I'm in the midst of moving, so I'm not sure how feasible it will be. So please turn on your notifications so you don't miss it. Part 2 will be about Ryo Tatsuki's dreams, including more details about the July 2025 catastrophe that may or may not happen. Until then, take care, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in, and let me know your thoughts so far in the comments below. Cheers.